The village of Pine Hollow was surrounded by a dense forest, where the mist never seemed to dissipate completely. Its narrow streets and old houses gave the impression that time had stood still. For Alex, Mia, Liam, and Sophie, the place was as dull as a cloudy day, but also the perfect setting for unsupervised adventures. That afternoon, the group decided to explore the forest. Alex led the way, as always, with his makeshift flashlight and a backpack full of snacks. Mia followed close behind, jotting down details in her worn-out notebook. She had a habit of recording everything from animal tracks to local legends. Liam walked further back, clearly skeptical about the reason for the hike. "Do you really think there's anything interesting here?" he grumbled. "It's just a forest." "And that's exactly why we came," replied Alex with a mischievous grin. Sophie, on the other hand, was restless. Ever since they had entered the forest, she had felt a weight in the air, as if they were being watched. She didn't say anything, but held tightly to the amulet she always carried around her neck. After an hour of walking, they found an abandoned barn, half hidden among the trees. The structure looked like it was about to collapse, with rotten boards and broken windows. "Let's go in," suggested Alex, pushing open the door. The smell of mold and old wood filled the air. Beams of light came through the gaps in the walls, illuminating the interior in greenish tones. There were rusty tools scattered on the floor and strange marks on the walls. "Hey, what's that?" asked Mia, pointing at the marks. The words seemed to be carved with precision. Onomatopoeic laughter like "ha ha ha" and "he he" covered the boards. Some letters were almost obliterated, while others looked freshly written. Sophie took a step back. "That doesn't look right." As they explored, Alex found a balloon hanging from the ceiling, attached by a string. The object was almost withered, but its red color was still vivid. He picked it up carefully. "Who would leave this here?" he asked, but no one answered. Mia started to write down what she saw, but stopped when she heard a sound in the distance. Something between a laugh and a squeak. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice low. Everyone was silent, their eyes attentive. The laughter was repeated, closer this time. Without a second thought, Alex let go of the balloon. "Let's get out of here." Outside the barn, the air seemed heavier. As they walked back towards the village, Sophie looked over her shoulder and stopped abruptly. "Guys, look!" The mist opened up in a small patch, revealing a figure in the distance. It was tall, with colorful striped clothes. Its face looked too white, like a mask. "Is it a clown?" whispered Mia, incredulous. "That's not funny," said Liam, trying to sound confident, but his voice shook. The figure remained motionless, as if watching them. Then, in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the mist. Alex pulled the group together. "Run!" They didn't stop until they reached the first houses in the village. When they finally felt safe, none of them spoke about what they had seen. That night, as Sophie was getting ready for bed, she heard a faint sound coming from her window. When she came closer to look, she saw a red balloon floating outside, tied to a branch. Her heart raced. There was no wind that night, but the balloon swayed as if it were being pulled. The next morning, the group met in the Pine Hollow library. The meeting was decided over breakfast, when Sophie called Alex, still shaken by the balloon she had seen in her window. "I couldn't sleep," Sophie confessed, fiddling with the amulet hanging around her neck. "That was a warning. I'm sure of it." "You're exaggerating," said Liam, sitting with his feet up on the reading table. "It was just a clown. Some weirdo trying to scare us. And why would a clown be in the middle of a forest?" "Liam," retorted Mia, without hiding her sarcasm. "Nothing about it is normal." Alex, who had been browsing the shelves for old books about the village, returned with a thick, dusty volume. He placed it on the table, causing a small cloud of dust to rise. If there's something strange going on, I bet it's related to this place's past. Pine Hollow is full of macabre stories. The group began leafing through old newspapers and historical records of the village. The yellowed, brittle pages told stories of mysterious disappearances, all concentrated around the forest. "Look at this," said Mia, pointing to an article dated 1947. A circus visited Pine Hollow over 70 years ago. But during a storm, the circus was struck by lightning. Part of it caught fire and several people disappeared. "And what does that have to do with what we saw?" asked Liam, leaning over to read better. "Let me finish," replied Mia. "The article mentions that the circus had a famous clown called Dark Pierrot. He was known for his scary tricks, but he disappeared the same day as the fire." Sophie crossed her arms, trying to contain a shiver. "Do you think this could be him? That he's still here?" "That's ridiculous," said Liam, but his voice wavered slightly. Alex ignored the comment and continued reading. After the fire, villagers began to hear laughter in the forest at night. Some children disappeared. Most of the villagers thought Pierrot was behind it, and nobody did anything, asked Sophie. Mia shook her head. "The story ends here. It seems that it just stopped happening, or people stopped talking about it. While they were still in the library, the group heard a sound that made their hearts stop. A low, hoarse laugh echoed down the silent corridor between the shelves of books. "Did you hear that?" whispered Sophie, clutching the amulet in her hand. Liam tried to remain calm. "It must be an employee." Before he could finish his sentence, a red balloon floated slowly into the reading room from the empty corridor. It moved smoothly, as if it were being guided by an invisible hand. "That's not normal," said Alex, suddenly standing up. The balloon stopped in the middle of the room and burst with a dry sound. On the floor lay a small folded piece of paper. Alex picked up the note and read aloud, "You're next." The panic was instantaneous. Mia gathered up her materials, and Sophie began to cry quietly. Even Liam, always skeptical, seemed shaken. "We need to tell someone," Sophie suggested. "And tell them what?" "That we're being chased by a ghost clown," Liam retorted, but his attempt at sarcasm didn't convince anyone. Alex took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "If this is really happening, we need to find out more. Something happened in that forest. Pierrot is still here, and he's warning us, or threatening us," corrected Mia. That evening, everyone went home, but the tension remained. While Liam was in his room, alone, he heard the sound of laughter coming from the hallway. He opened the door and found a balloon attached to the stair railing, with another note hanging from it. "You are being watched." The next morning, the group met again, this time at Alex's house. The mood was heavy, and no one seemed willing to talk about what had happened the night before. Liam was the first to break the silence. "I saw another balloon last night." Everyone looked at him, surprised. Sophie, who held a cup of tea trembling in her hands, looked about to cry again. "He was on the stairs with a note. It said I was being watched." "So that's it," said Alex, slapping his hand on the table. "Pierrot isn't just scaring us. He's stalking us." "But why?" asked Mia. "What did we do for him?" "We went to the barn," replied Sophie, her voice low, "and we took that balloon. Maybe he's mad because we invaded his space, or maybe he's playing with us," added Alex. "Circuses are about fun, right? And clowns like to play games." "That's no fun," exclaimed Sophie, standing up. Over the next few days, the group realized that the clown's presence was becoming more intense. Everyone began to experience more personal and terrifying scares. Alex, while alone in the bathroom, the mirror fogged up for no apparent reason. When he cleaned the glass, he saw a clown mask hanging in the shower. When he turned around, the mask had disappeared. But on the mirror, there was a message written in steam. "Your turn is coming." Mia, While studying in her room, she found an old circus ticket folded inside her backpack. The ticket had her name written on it in red. When she picked it up, she heard a low laugh, but when she looked around, there was no one there. Liam. At home, Liam began to hear louder and louder laughter throughout the night. He checked the hallway, but never found anything. One night, while he was sleeping, he felt something touch his leg. When he looked, there was a red balloon attached to the headboard. Sophie. Sophie started seeing quick visions of the clown in random places at school, in the forest, and even in the reflection of shop windows in the village. He never did anything, just stood there watching. After sharing their experiences, the group began to notice a pattern. The clown seemed to feed on their fears. The more scared we get, the more he appears, said Mia, analyzing the notes and balloons they had received. It's as if he likes to see us afraid. So what do we do? Asked Sophie. How do we stand up to him? Liam sighed. Maybe the problem is that we're trying to understand it logically. It's not something that makes sense. It's supernatural. And if it's supernatural, there must be a way to stop it, said Alex. Mia suggested they go back to the library to look for more information, but Sophie hesitated. What if he's waiting for us there? Alex held her shoulder. If we get scared, he'll win. We can't give him that. In the library, Mia found a diary hidden among the old books. The diary belonged to one of the villagers at the time of the circus. It described how the clown seemed to be connected to a ritual, something that involved a circus object, such as a lantern that was used in the main show. Maybe that lantern is important, said Mia. Alex agreed. We need to find it. If it's still around, it might be our only chance of putting an end to this. On their way out of the library, the group came across something that made them stop instantly. A red balloon was attached to the door, with another note hanging from it. You're closer than you think. See you soon. The sun was already setting when the group decided to go in search of the lantern mentioned in the diary. They had little information about where to find it, but Mia remembered a reference to an old church on the outskirts of the village, which had long been abandoned. If this lantern really existed, it must be there, said Mia, as she put the diary away in her backpack. What if it's a trap? Asked Sophie nervously. We have no choice, replied Alex. If he's following us anyway, better to confront him with something that might give us a chance. The walk through the forest to the old church was tense. The air seemed colder, and the mist spread between the trees, making every step more frightening. Sophie held Alex's arm, while Mia and Liam walked side by side, trying to ignore the strange sounds around them. They reached the church just before dusk. The building was in ruins, with broken windows and pieces of wood lying everywhere. The main door was ajar, creaking slightly in the wind. Are you sure this is a good idea? Asked Liam, looking suspiciously at the dark interior. No, replied Alex, turning on his flashlight. But we'll find out. Inside the church, the group began to look for the lantern described in the diary. The walls were covered in moss and the smell of damp was suffocating. After a few minutes, Sophie found something on the altar, an old lantern made of rusty metal and cracked glass. Is this it? She asked, holding the object carefully. It has to be, said Mia, examining it. The description matches. But before they could celebrate, they heard a low, familiar laugh coming from the corridor behind them. Pierrot emerged from the shadows, more frightening than ever. His figure was grotesque, with glowing eyes and a smile that seemed to extend beyond what was natural. He wore a torn circus costume, and his movements were erratic, as if he were dancing clumsily. Welcome to my show, he said, his voice echoing off the walls. The group instinctively backed away, but Alex stepped forward, holding the lantern. If you want a show, then it's over here. Pierrot laughed louder, shaking his head. You think you can beat me? I am fear. I am the darkness inside you. Pierrot stepped forward, and the lantern in Alex's hand began to glow with a golden light. He raised it, and the light spread through the room, making the clown flinch. "It's working," shouted Mia. Pierrot shouted angrily and stretched out his hands towards the group, causing black balloons to appear and explode around them. The group split up, trying to avoid the attacks. "Hold him in the spotlight," shouted Liam. Alex kept the torchlight pointed at Pierrot, while Mia frantically read the diary in search of further instructions. "It says here that we need to focus on what gives us courage." "Easy said," shouted Sophie as she hid behind a bench. One by one, the young people began to face their inner fears, remembering what motivated them to keep going. Sophie held her amulet and whispered the name of her grandmother, who always told her to be brave. Liam closed his eyes and imagined his family, who had always believed in him. As everyone concentrated on his courage, the light from the lantern intensified, hitting Pierrot directly. He screamed, trying to dodge, but the light enveloped him completely. "It doesn't end here," he shouted, before disappearing in an explosion of light and mist. The group was silent for a few seconds, breathing heavily. Sophie was the first to speak. "Is he gone?" "For now," said Alex, still holding the flashlight. The group left the church, feeling exhausted but relieved. They knew they had won, but the note left in the diary remained in their minds. Fear never completely disappears. On their way back to Pine Hollow, Mia noticed something strange in her backpack. A small red balloon had been left inside, with the words, "See you next time." The young people returned to Pine Hollow in the early hours of the morning, with the sky still covered in heavy fog. Although the Pierrot clown had disappeared, the feeling of unease persisted. The flashlight, now tucked away in Alex's backpack, still glowed faintly, as a reminder that the threat had not been completely eliminated. "Do you think it's really over?" asked Sophie, looking back as they walked. Alex shook his head, uncertain. "I don't know, but at least we managed to keep him away. For now." "For now," repeated Mia, clutching her backpack tightly. She still hadn't told the others about the red balloon she had found inside. Over the next few days, the group tried to get back to their routine. Alex returned to soccer practice. Mia immersed herself in her studies. Liam pretended nothing had happened, and Sophie spent more time with her family. But none of them could forget the laughter in the woods, the threatening notes, and the figure of the clown who seemed to embody their worst fears. "It's like he's still here, even if he isn't," said Sophie, one afternoon when they met in the village cafe. "It's fear," Mia replied thoughtfully. "That's what he represents. It doesn't really go away. It just gives us time to breathe." As the weeks passed, Pine Hollow returned to normal, but something seemed different. Stories about Pierrot began to spread again, especially among the older residents. Some said they had heard laughter in the forest, others that they had seen red balloons hanging from trees. The group avoided talking about it, but they knew that the battle in the church was not the end. Alex kept the lantern in a wooden box and buried it in the backyard of his house as a way of protecting the sacred object. "If he comes back, we'll be ready," she said, while the others nodded silently. One quiet night, Sophie was alone in her room, trying to study. The light from her lamp flickered slightly, and she frowned. "Just an electrical fault," she muttered to herself. But as she looked at the window, her heart stopped. Outside, hanging from a tree branch, was a red balloon. It swayed slowly, even though the air was still. Sophie stood up, trying to control her panic. As she got closer to the window, she heard a low, hoarse laugh echoing in the distance. She quickly closed the curtains and sat down on the bed, hugging the amulet around her neck. Pierrot was still there, waiting,